But weighing in now on this is former NATO commander Rear Admiral Parry, MP and former British Army officer Colonel Bob Stewart, and the Henry Jackson Society Research Fellow Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Bob Stewart, let me start with you. Are you worried that the West are appeasing Putin with our approach to this potential conflict with Ukraine?
I don't think they're appeasing. They're extremely concerned about what's happening. The fact of the matter is that Putin has put his military forces around Ukraine. He is in a position to assault Ukraine. He has the power to do so. No doubt, the instructions have gone down to military commanders as to what they should do, perhaps with options. But actually, the decision has not been made. And that decision will be made by Putin when he assesses that it is in his interest to do so. So we have the situation where we have got to convince Mr. Putin that it is not in his interest to do so because of the economic, financial, political, and diplomatic penalties that the Russians may well have to endure if he does. Not least, by the way, the fact that Russian forces will be killing fellow Slavs. That will not go down well at home.
Rear Admiral Parry, are there some similarities to 1938 in that, as much as we might like to pretend that we are, the West really isn't ready for some sort of war here?
Of course, there are similarities when you're dealing with totalitarian regimes and dictators. They can make decisions much more quickly. They can mass their forces. They don't have to justify themselves. They don't actually have to face elections. So there are similarities. There's no doubt about that. And I think without question, you heard Bob say it, there are penalties involved for the Putin regime. One thing he didn't mention was military penalties. That's because we aren't ready for war. We're not prepared for it, either in our minds or in any physical way. But one thing we have to bear in mind is Ukraine is not a member of NATO. And we have no real geopolitical or military commitment to help Ukrainians other than the moral basis for helping a democracy survive in the face of totalitarian assault. If this were an assault against a fellow NATO country, you'd be hearing people say, well, there'll be military consequences as well. Unfortunately, we're caught in the middle here with a country that is a democracy, wants to remain a democracy under threat from a totalitarian regime. And I'm afraid it's symptomatic of a modern world where you have the totalitarian regimes of China, Russia, and Iran ranged against what I call the maritime democracies. United States, parts of Europe indeed, United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, people like that. So essentially, that's the new two-block world. And the decision over Ukraine is whether we lose a democracy, if you like, to the totalitarian bloc.